I got introduced to Life of Agony because of season 3 of The Office. The episode called The Initiation sees Dwight hazing and training the junior salesman Ryan Howard. In one scene, Dwight can be seen listening to Life of Agony in his car. Life of Agony would form in 1989, and the history of the band began with bassist Alan Robert and guitarist Joey Z, sometimes referred to as Skinny Joey Z, in their early days. Both of them went to the same high school, but it took them 6 months of seeing each other every day at the bus stop, riding the same bus, and being in the same art class, as well as both wearing Metallica t-shirts before they even spoke a word to one another. Eventually, they started talking and hit it off. Robert was already friends with the guys from the band Biohazard, growing up close to Evan Seinfeld. Long before Biohazard got a label deal, Robert brought Joey Z down to their rehearsals, and soon enough Joey Z and Robert became roadies for Biohazard, with Robert even designing some of the graphics for the band. The pair would soon establish contacts with promoters, and they learned a lot about how to book shows, something which of course came in handy later on in their careers. Joey Z had a cousin named Keith Caputo, and according to Joey Z, Caputo was an introverted, quiet, detached kid, being born in 1973 and coming from a broken home. His mother, sadly, was a heroin addict who died when he was just 1, while his dad was also an addict. Due to his father's situation, Caputo would be raised by his grandparents, and from a young age, he loved all things feminine. He loved watching his grandmother putting makeup on, and she'd even put makeup on him. Keith would tell Rolling Stone his grandma would whisper to him, "Don't tell Grandpa you want to dress up as a girl and go to school. He'll kill you. He'll kill me." Keith's grandfather was a strict disciplinarian and was often violent towards his grandmother. Keith compared his daily home life to that scene in Raging Bull where Robert De Niro's character flips the table over. His father would come to visit on rare occasions, but his grandparents, for the most part, tried to hide why his dad wasn't in the picture. It would result in Keith having trust issues later in his life. As he got older, when his dad did show up, he was always a burden, recalling to Rolling Stone. "I was mothering him throughout his life. I was giving him money, putting him up at my home, bailing him out of jail, buying him dope, and watching him punch walls, trying to heal his gangrene." Keith's uncle bought a piano for his grandparents' place, and he soon started getting into classical music and going to lessons between the ages of 15 and 18. Recalling to Rolling Stone, "I would pull a lot of sadness from Chopin and Beethoven. It was my inspiration growing up." Caputo was also into Nina Simone, Led Zeppelin, Queen, David Bowie, Pink Floyd, Muddy Waters, as well as Sinead O'Connor and My Bloody Valentine. His initial vision was to attend Juilliard and become a classically trained musician. His cousin Joey Z, meanwhile, also came from a broken home with a violent alcoholic father who would be kicked out of the family house. Joey Z was into heavier music groups like Metallica, White Zombie, and Sepultura. Meanwhile, bassist Alan Roberts' parents both worked in the school system, and his dad also took a second job to support the family. But Alan was a shy kid and struggled with depression, something his parents weren't really that aware of since he wasn't acting out. He would channel a lot of his dark feelings into artwork, drawing comics, but his artwork was pretty gruesome and involved a lot of revenge stories. But strangely enough, this artwork helped him make friends at school because his classmates were really interested in his work. He soon started selling his art at book fairs, and much later on in his life, he published coloring books and comics. Robert wouldn't learn music until much later, starting at the age of 16 or 17 when he started to play guitar, and he was self-taught. His girlfriend was pretty proficient at the instrument. She taught him some basic Metallica riffs, and he soon bought a Black Sabbath tab book and learned about 10 Sabbath songs. He was going to go down the path of learning scales and reading music, but after learning John Lennon couldn't read music, he decided that he just wanted to play by ear. He would, however, take music lessons around the time that Life of Agony put out their second record. Joey Z, Caputo, and Robert were latchkey kids and obviously had a lot of pain inside, and they soon started inflicting that on the outside world. They would smash windows around the neighborhood and destroy property. They soon started gravitating towards aggressive music to get their anger out, and they soon became frequent attendees at the L'Amour Club in Brooklyn, which played host to a lot of hardcore bands. Caputo was underage at the time, so they would have to sneak him in a drum case. There was always a frequent police presence at L'Amour, and blood and teeth lying on the floor were also a frequent sight at the club's violent shows. The trio soon turned their attention to starting their own bands and writing their own music. Joey Z had some friends that he would jam with, and he knew his cousin Keith could sing because he had heard him sing while playing piano. One day he asked Keith to come jam with him and his friends, but Keith honestly never thought he'd front a band because he didn't think he could sing. It was during their first jam together Keith sang the lyrics off of a Raid can into the microphone, and soon enough the seeds of Life of Agony would be planted. Joey Z and Keith soon started playing in a band called Isolated Fear, which took part in high school Battle of the Bands competitions. Practicing across the street from them was Robert's thrash band, an outfit named Beheaded, which he sang and played bass. Isolated Fear soon lost their bass player though, and Robert joined the band, and they decided to change their name to Life of Agony. The name came from a dream that Robert had, with a bunch of newspaper headlines falling on a tiled bathroom floor, with one of them reading Life of Agony. For a brief period though, before they used the moniker Life of Agony, they also called themselves Capital Punishment. Robert would design the band's logo, with each piece representing one of the band members. Early in the group's career, Robert would also be the principal lyricist and melody writer for the band, taking stories he had heard from Keith and Joey Z to come up with the lyrics. As for drummers, Life of Agony would go through a number of them throughout their entire career. The members' broad range of influences would create a sound that had elements of grunge, hardcore, and metal. Life of Agony would play their first gig in New Jersey in February of 1990 at a place called Faces in Kingsburg. Surprisingly, the band sold out their first show. The group started playing gigs in the hardcore scene, but they didn't identify with these bands, feeling like outcasts and even catching flack from some of these groups. Joey Z would tell a New Jersey paper, "We grew up in the hardcore scene and our roots are in hardcore music, but as time went on, we became a little more melodic. I don't think you can call us hardcore." Despite not getting love from other bands, they would develop a following, and they soon started playing shows all along the Eastern Coast in cities like Baltimore, Washington, and of course New York City. It was during this period of time Robert was working at a newsstand on weekends and playing shows with Life of Agony during the week. Robert would do a gig, then get dropped off by Joey Z at his job at a place called Mill Basin Stop in Brooklyn. He'd be on no sleep, and he'd write lyrics on the sheetrock in the back room of the store. Once Life of Agony got signed, they would cut out that sheetrock with the lyrics on it. In August of 1990, Life of Agony would record their first demo tape, which was actually done in Josh Silver's studio. Josh Silver was the keyboardist in Typo Negative, and Silver would be instrumental in helping shape Life of Agony's sound, suggesting that they use a D tuning instead of an E for a heavier sound. By 1992, Life of Agony were regularly selling out shows at L'Amour on their own, and that momentum kept going in their favor as bigger touring acts started having the band open for them. This led to the group getting on the radar of Roadrunner Records, but it wasn't a done deal right away. The label's A&R guy, a fellow named Monty Connor, had some reservations about the band's sound, especially Caputo's voice, which sounded somewhat similar to Glenn Danzig, but he eventually realized that's what made the band unique, and he signed them to the label. Signing with Roadrunner made a lot of sense, given that the label was relatively new, and they also had a lot of heavy acts on their roster like Sepultura, Typo Negative, Fear Factory, and Biohazard, to name a few. At Josh Silver's suggestion, Life of Agony would get Typo Negative drummer Sal Abrascato to play on their first record. Both Typo Negative and Life of Agony would also share the same manager. The band would hit the studio with Josh Silver, who would produce their first album for Roadrunner, which was a concept record. Robert would tell Metal Sludge where they got the idea for the album from, saying, "We love Pink Floyd's The Final Cut and The Wall, and both albums made a huge impact on us. So I think we started to incorporate more melody into our songs because of that influence, especially vocally, and we started to realize soon after we got signed that we wanted to create a concept album." That was definitely a big departure from what other bands around us were doing at the time. Titled River Runs Red, their debut album would be a conceptual narrative record telling the story of a protagonist who comes from a broken home, touching on themes such as suicide, abuse, and neglect. The band would frequently draw comparisons to both Prong and Propane, who they would actually go tour with later on. Caputo would tell Rolling Stone about the album's dark and depressing themes. Our first record was basically my diary. While their debut album wouldn't chart, Life of Agony still got a good amount of attention, being featured on MTV's Headbangers Ball, and they even opened for Anthrax. The record would sell about 150,000 copies, respectable debut. Keep in mind, the year the band released River Runs Red, Robert was still in his senior year of college attending art school. It was during this time Life of Agony got a multitude of touring offers, and he soon had to decide whether he was going to continue with his education or stay in the band. Ultimately, he chose to put his education on hold and tour with Life of Agony. River Runs Red would be a very relatable album for a lot of people. You have to remember, this was a time when there was no talk of mental health. The internet was not widely accessible to people who could seek out others who were going through the same thing as they were. So music would be one of the places where people could find solace in. However, some in the press would criticize the band for glorifying self-harm, but Life of Agony shot back against these accusations, with Caputo telling a Connecticut paper, "We're sick of the problems of life and would like to use our frustration as a way to show our fans they're not alone and to help them cope with their problems." With Robert adding, "It's taboo, but it crosses everyone's mind. It's a subject that people don't want to talk about." River Runs Red would become a hugely influential record for the musicians who came after Life of Agony, and it's since made many best-of lists for the alternative metal genre. Then in 1994, the band gained national attention, but not for the reason you might expect. It was in December of '94, the week before Christmas. Life of Agony were set to play a show at La Amour to a crowd of about 500 people. At that show was an 18-year-old intoxicated fan named Christopher Mitchell. It was at the end of Life of Agony's set. As the crowd dispersed, he stage dived, hitting the bare concrete floor head first. Mitchell would end up dying from a brain injury. The band were soon sued. There was even a court case in which one of the bouncers was accused of throwing the fan off stage and charged with manslaughter. However, Life of Agony and the bouncer would be cleared of any wrongdoing when two witnesses came forward. But following that incident, the band got pretty strict about keeping an eye on the crowd to ensure that never happens again. Life of Agony would return in 1995 with their sophomore release, Ugly. Their second record deals with insecurity and feeling out of place. But it was a dark time for the band. Everyone minus Robert was doing drugs and drinking pretty heavily, and he would recall feeling isolated, and he soon started to hate his bandmates, drawing some pretty violent imagery of them. But Life of Agony got some prime touring opportunities, opening for Ozzy and Korn, but the band also faced a backlash from some of their fans for changing their sound, and the record's poor commercial performance resulted in the group being pulled off the road, opening for Typo Negative. It was during that tour for the album the band also lost their drummer Sal Abrascato, who they had some creative and personal issues with. Life of Agony would return in 1997 with their third album, Soul Searching Sun, which marked another departure for the group with a more commercial sound. The band were soon met with accusations of selling out. Joey Z would tell the Montreal Gazette, "The proper meaning of the term sellout is to be paid to do something you don't want to do. Nobody paid us to do anything differently." River Runs Red and Soul Searching Sun are like valleys, and then you have Ugly, which is the peak in the middle, kind of like the bridge that needed to be crossed. Also changing the band's musical direction was the dismissal of Abrascato, which Joey Z claimed made the band sound more mellow. He would claim that Abrascato was being too pushy and putting everyone down when they tried to express an idea. Initially, Soul Searching Sun was shaping up to be the band's commercial breakthrough. They were getting traction on rock radio and MTV with the song Weeds and Tangerine, and then it all came to an abrupt end. Caputo at the time was in a really dark place, doing a lot of drugs, both uppers and downers, feeling hopeless. It was the same month Soul Searching Sun came out in September of '97. The frontman quit the group, telling his bandmates he was in too much pain and he was feeling hopeless. He would recall to Rolling Stone, "A day turned into a weekend, and a weekend turned into a week of feeling like I wanted to die. I wanted to escape this reality. My bandmates couldn't figure out why I wasn't enjoying the success of the band. We were about to blow up on Soul Searching Sun, and I felt I was like, what good is my success if I can't enjoy my soul and my body? The news shocked the members, and Joey Z would admit the loss of his cousin sent him into a depression. After leaving the group, Caputo would make a pop-sounding demo with a group called Absolute Bloom, and he also put out his first solo record called Died Laughing. Life of Agony were left to contemplate their future, but they eventually decided to soldier on. Robert would tell Rolling Stone, "We were on the cover of the music-focused New Jersey alt weekly The Aquarian, and in the back of the issue, there was an ad for our singer. It was unbelievable." The band would find a new singer in Whitfield Crane of Ugly Kid Joe fame in 1998. Just a side note, guys, if you like Ugly Kid Joe, I've done a whole story on the band's history. The link is down below. Crane would be the only person who auditioned who could actually sing the songs, and things were starting to finally look up for the band. They opened for Megadeth, they did Ozfest, but it didn't feel quite right. They missed Keith. The songs also didn't feel genuine when Crane was singing them, and Life of Agony would disband the following year in 1999, with Joey Z playing in the nu metal outfit Stereo Mud, while Robert played in the band Among Thieves. It was during the band's hiatus Caputo's father would end up dying at the age of 56. He would be found in a hotel room, with Caputo having to go identify his body. It was after seeing his father's motionless body that he opted to keep living. It was at the funeral that Alan, Joey, and Keith, who hadn't talked to each other in quite a while, finally cleared the air, and it felt like old times. This would lead to the reunion of Life of Agony, and the experience of seeing Keith lose his father resulted in Joey Z wanting to make amends with his father, who is now sober. The band would return in 2003 with a series of reunion shows. Joey Z would reflect back on the band's internal problems before their breakup, telling New Jersey Paper, "The state of the band at that moment was that we were young guys, macho, and we had egos. We all wanted a piece of the cake, but we didn't deal with each other well." The members would even axe their outside projects, with the exception of Caputo, with Joey Z adding, "He needs another outlet, it keeps him happy." The band's reunion shows would see them play through their whole first album and debut some new material to gauge the fans' response to them. Life of Agony would sign with Sony-owned Epic Records, and in 2005 they would return with their fourth record titled Broken Valley. The album's sound got some comparisons to supergroup Velvet Revolver, which the band agreed with, saying they had been listening to a lot of STP and Velvet Revolver's debut record Contraband around this time. Robert would tell the Great Falls Tribune, "Those old school fans who have come along this journey with us, they've been there through so many metamorphoses of this band that they would have split a long time ago, and some of them did. Those of us who have stuck around are more open-minded enough to accept that we are different than we were in '93. The band would end up touring with Mudvayne and American Head Charge, but the album hit a wall, and not for the reason you might expect. It would turn out their label, without the band's knowledge and even the public's knowledge, had placed hidden software on Broken Valley that prevented people from ripping the songs into their iTunes library. There was a big backlash against Sony, and the album had to be pulled off store shelves and off the internet. Joey Z would recall, "We used to call it the Black Cloud," with Robert adding, "Circumstances and destiny kept knocking us down." It was the following year in 2006 they left Sony, but they continued to tour. But in 2008, Caputo was going through a pretty rough time in his life, contemplating ending it, and he was back to doing drugs. But he soon realized he wasn't being true to himself and felt like he was born in the wrong body. He would make the decision to transition to a woman, and it would be a friend of the frontman who would direct him to a gender therapist, who then suggested he go to an endocrinologist to help him with the process. Keith would now become Mina Caputo, and during this time Mina would keep the news initially hidden from her bandmates. She would recall to Rolling Stone, "I was living in stealth for about 3 years, but it got to the point that my body changed so much, I couldn't hide the physical changes. I wanted to come out. I couldn't bear pretending to be a boy anymore in this world." Caputo would admit that when he turned 18, he started to dress in drag and go out to transsexual clubs in New York. One of his cousins, Joey Z's brother, would escort him to the nightclubs and acted as his bodyguard. Mina would reveal to Rolling Stone, "I learned about it all from the girls in the street. How to acquire hormones without a doctor, how to escort, how to traffic drugs. I was an assassin. It was around 2010 that even fans started to notice the changes in Caputo's physical appearance, and it was one day after receiving some hateful comments, he finally decided to make it publicly known that he was transitioning into a woman. Caputo's bandmates learned of the news the same way the public did, by reading the online articles. Robert would recall to Rolling Stone, "I literally found out getting on stage at a show in Holland. We were about to step out and the promoter said, 'Should I announce this as your last show?' And I go, 'Why would you do that?' He showed me his phone and it was all over the metal news. It was a shock to me. We played the show and we talked on the bus, just the two of us. What bothered me wasn't that you came out. I was proud that you did that. That was such a fearless act. For me, I thought we were closer, that you would feel comfortable enough to be honest with me." Her bandmates, though, weren't entirely surprised by the announcement, as they recognized that the signs were there all along. Caputo would attribute her long history of depression to feeling trapped in the wrong body, and she soon stopped doing drugs as well. In 2011, the band soon took an extended break, and many were left wondering with Mina's announcement if Life of Agony was done. Then in 2014, the band's manager would get an offer to play a festival in Belgium, which the members seemed genuinely excited about. But it was also nerve-wracking as to how the band, now fronted by Mina, would be received. She would recall to Rolling Stone, "It was nerve-wracking. I was living with fear that I might get shot on stage. There were about 90,000 kids there, and 40,000 of them were going apeshit till the end, giving me love, holding up signs. It turned out to be everything I thought it wouldn't be." Life of Agony would end up nabbing a recording contract with Napalm Records, and they put out their first album with Mina in 2017 titled A Place Where There's No More Pain. Joey Z would tell Rolling Stone, "With the album's title, it's almost like we're creating a safe haven for fans. A lot of people go through the same struggles as us, and they have the same fears and insecurities, so our message is, come join us." Drummer Sal Abriscato, though, would end up leaving the band around 2017, and there's been differing accounts as to why he left. Mina claimed he was transphobic, while he claimed he had nothing in common with the members anymore and didn't like the direction they were going in, adding Mina was, and I quote, "a really nasty person who is not who she says she is." Life of Agony would return once again in 2019 with their most recent record, The Sound of Scars, which was the band's sequel to their first album, River Runs Red. It would deal with themes of trauma and recovery. A documentary of the same name would be released in 2022 that chronicled the band's career. Lately, the band is set to be working on a new album of material, and just last year in 2023, the band commemorated River Runs Red by doing a 30th anniversary tour. That concludes today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, if you have suggestions for future topics you'd like to see me cover, use the link in the description box below, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.